Hello, everyone. Phil Gallagher of ThrabenU here for another Legacy stream. And today we're playing with something cool. We are going to be playing with a Keuga deck. Conceptually, this one is similar to the Blood Sun Eldrazi Stompy deck that has been rolling around, I don't know, probably for the past year or two now. Which never really saw widespread play, but a couple of pilots, such as DJ Isma, had a decent amount of success with it. And today we're trying a Keuga spin on that same archetype. Notably, we lose Chalice of the Void by doing this, but we gain an extra threat, which in a lockpiece deck is definitely meaningful. Yeah, Dr. Bill, I updated the deck building challenge thing already. I got that. As a side note, now that we're past the point where, like, the companion hell is in the midst of everything, I'm going to be looking at doing the last sub challenge that I put off for a little while that we already qualified for, the Phil versus the subs day. I'll start talking with the Discord sometime in the next week, probably like once I have everything 100% done for school, and then we'll try to set a time and figure out all the details for that. So that should be fun and coming soon. Am I going to play Enchantress again soon? If it shows up in the donation queue, yes, I would love to play it again. I believe we have a pending donation for something that's not quite Enchantress, but we'll scratch the same itch. Hey, 8 ape decks are good. I really can't overstate enough how good I think mana acceleration is in Legacy. So for example, this content isn't public yet, but this is the deck list that I recorded with for Daily D&T this week that has 4 Chromox, 4 Petal. I think conceptually, moving fast in Legacy right now is pretty important. Oh, sorry, this isn't the exact deck list, but this is similar. The exact deck list I played had like Brimaz in these slots instead, and a 3rd Smuggler's Copter, and a slightly different sideboard. But conceptually, the fast mana is really good right now. Alright, so looking at the strengths of this deck list, like, what does this deck list do? Why would we want to play it? So we have 8 Spirit Guides plus 8 Soul Lands to accelerate out our threats, which means, like, we're going to hit hard, we're going to hit fast. And despite the fact that Keuga's restriction doesn't let you play cards with CMC 3 or less, we actually have 6 early removal spells. We have 4 Bone Crusher Giant, which at 2 mana deals 2 damage. We have Dead, which at 1 mana deals 2 damage, and Gone, which can bounce anything. So, even though we're this deck that shouldn't be able to play cards that we can cast early, we have kind of cheated that restriction. So what are the cool things we get to power out? We have 8 lock pieces in Blood Sun and Trinisphere. So Blood Sun is a little different than Blood Moon. So when it enters the battlefield, you draw a card, and all lands lose all abilities except mana abilities. Notably, with our own mana base, this means that City of Traders does not go away. It loses the ability that causes it to sacrifice, and then it just turns it into a true all-upside soul land, which is really cool. We have Klothys, which I think is an A+ supplemental threat right now. It helps you stabilize, it helps you, like, slowly bleed your opponent to death, and I think both of those things are relatively important right now. So, like, this will slowly bleed a control player to death who is trying to, like, peck you to death with Baleful Strix or something like that. And it really helps to stop the bleeding when you're paired against a Delver threat and you don't have a removal spell. And then we just have some powerful things. So we have some Planeswalkers, we have the uncounterable and slightly annoying Shifting Ceratops, we have Thought-Knots here. The sideboard doesn't really contain a lot of cards. Like, most of the stuff that we're playing in the main deck is just fine and isn't going to require us to deal with very many things. So, like, we are just playing these powerful things that we want to accelerate out early. We're not going to adjust our plan a lot. So we have some hate for Storm, we have some hate for graveyard decks, and then I just have, like, a little bit of removal for creatures, for artifacts, and a few flexible cards that I can bring in when some of my main deck stuff isn't good, or when I think the game is going to go a little bit longer. So this is kind of the game plan that we are doing here today. I believe it was Turbojet Mega Christ. Let me confirm. Yeah, Turbojet Mega Christ donated for a quote-unquote dealer's choice stream, where I was just supposed to find something fun and stream with it, and I think this checked all the boxes. Comical Flop says, if moving fast is the best strategy, shouldn't you be on Garuda? I don't know if you saw, but Bob Huang just won one of the big Magic Online Legacy events with Garuda. So yes, that is a totally reasonable strategy to be on. Not with white DMT. Although, interestingly, Bob's build wasn't 100% all in, and the Grim Monoliths were actually in the sideboard, which was a relatively surprising take. Obviously, it ended up working out for him. His logic was you really only want the Monoliths when you're, like, 100% all in on trying to combo as quickly as possible. For anyone who wasn't around earlier this week, webcam is currently broken. That's why you don't see me on screen. The new one has been ordered and should be here around the end of the week. Ah, yes. The good old 1 land, 2 Spirit Guide Trinisphere hand. And I am on the draw. This one's kind of sketchy. Let's see if I have any data on my opponent, because, like, if, for example, if they played Storm, and I knew this turn 1 transfer would just win the game, I'd keep this hand. No, it looks like they're a Delver player, and occasionally, like, Merfolk or Blue Mush. I think I want something with a couple more lands here. This technically has less mana than the previous hand, unfortunately. But I think there's a better chance that this hand is stable as the game goes along. And I have a lot of mana sources to go into. Alright, yeah, previous hand would have absolutely folded to Merfolk. Drake, it's definitely weird. Blood Moon isn't particularly good with Astrolabe and all of the basic lands running around, so, like, there's definite advantages. Ooh. Unexpected. There's definite advantages to going and trying out alternative builds. I think the plan here is turbo out Thought-Knot Seer, use that to try to take a True Name Nemesis before that can come down. And then hope to draw a land to play Klothys, otherwise use Bone Crusher Giant to remove a 2/2 Lord. If we get Dazed or something here, this is super savage. but I don't think I get the luxury to play around stuff this game. Oh wow, opponent's hand would have been absolute trash if not for the Sylvan Library. Sylvan Library going to do a lot of work here. At least we have a threat in play now, so that hopefully we get to pressure the opponent's life total, so the Sylvan Library... Oh wow, just one off the Sylvan. Please don't be True Name Nemesis as the one. This is a very interesting Merfolk build. So I know about a Spell Pierce from my opponent. So I just trade for Spell Pierce if I cast the Bone Crusher Giant here. Is that fine? If I hit another mana, I would probably play Klothys over Bone Crusher Giant. And if my opponent Sylvan Libraries and gets another Lord, then my Bone Crusher Giant ceases to be a removal spell. There's also a world where my opponent does not counter this in fear of what comes next. Okay. We'll be looking to steal this game with Fiery Confluence. Easiest way to win this game is just draw 2 lands in a row. Easiest way to lose this game is for my opponent to draw a True Name Nemesis, which stonewalls my board. Oh, wow. They are dead to Fiery Confluence at any point this game now. I don't think I get to attack with this Thought-Knot Seer anymore. Like, it's most certainly a trap in some capacity for me to attack. Okay, so that's another one of the 1-drop green creatures. So opponent is representing that they have drawn another lord by making this attack. And I have to decide whether or not I'm going to call them on their attack. I feel like I don't need to call them this turn. But maybe that's not true. So I draw one land, I play Klothys. I draw two lands, I play Fiery Confluence. Maybe I do. So if I do, I only take 3 to 4 damage this turn. I'm going to go ahead and call. Like, it's obviously very bad for me if they have the Lord. But I probably need to try and buy every turn that I can. And it's pretty likely, although not guaranteed, that taking the block this turn gives me 1 extra turn. That is the world in which I do not get that extra turn. And this is like just late. 4, 8, 12, 15. Yeah, this is too slow. We did not draw lands and died. Steve, all I'm saying is that $12 buys the stream for a day. Okay, we have 5 extra removal spells that we can bring in. We will probably do so. We probably won't go Krosan Grip deep. I'm not going to just go right out and assume that there's a... Well, actually, maybe I will, since Blood Sun is pretty bad. I don't know how many Sylvan Libraries my opponent is playing. But, like, obviously the Trinispheres aren't good. The Blood Suns aren't great. I don't even know that my opponent is playing Wasteland. Like, I don't know what their build is like. So they're probably a Daze and Force of Will build, since they have 1-drops. They're probably, like, since they have 1-drops that they're going to actively care about, they're probably not a Chalice build. Kozilek's Return is going to be nice as an early sweeper, but once my opponent has 2 Lords, Kozilek's Return is kind of a dead card. I'm going to have 3 Kozilek's Return, 2 Big Chandra, 2 Fiery Confluence as sweepers. A League. So I go... I could go turn 2 Shifting Ceratops, but I'd be more likely to want to turn 3 Shifting Ceratops and, like, keep the City of Traitors around for the long game. I don't think my hand is super impressive by any stretch of the imagination, but I think it's good enough to keep. Yeah, right now I'm leaning towards playing this City of Traitors turn 4. Like, as long as my opponent, like, plays the Lord of Atlantis, I get something to Bone Crusher Giant. I can just, like, cast Bone Crusher Giant, and then... Or cast Stomp, then cast Bone Crusher Giant in this next turn cycle, without having to play out the Soul Land too early. Command Speak is the green thing? It is. Yeah, I think I'm just gonna cast Kozilek's Return when my opponent goes to cast or Violin a Lord. Oh, that's very good for afterwards. Neat. Nice. Super happy that that just worked. Is this where I just want to turn the corner and start attacking my opponent? I think so. Like, I just play Shifting Ceratops, and then I have 2 removal spells to back it up, get it through. So notably, this isn't protection from my opponent's deck like you normally might expect it to be, because like my opponent does have green creatures. Play Planeswalker minus Planeswalker Bone Crusher Giant. Get the other one. Seems good. And note, I can protect this Planeswalker if I want, but I don't think this game is about protecting this Planeswalker. I think this game is about turning Shifting Ceratops sideways 2 more times. So, like, I'm just going to let this Planeswalker go. I don't think I need more cards than what I have currently to win this game. Steve, my current thoughts on Death and Taxes are I play it when people pay me, but I will not be playing that deck for my own enjoyment at this point. So, like, I have donations for daily D&T for the next 5 weeks. So I will be playing D&T during that time. I wonder if I can get the double block out of this. If I get the double block, I get the Kumena speaker for free. Oh no, I don't get the double block at all. You're right, Pro Blue. So I can go Stomp and Bone Crusher Giant in this turn cycle, which is probably fine. Don't think we change any sideboarding based on what we saw. Bob says, in case you were wondering, I absolutely did not intend to keep that vial at 1. Yeah! Opponent is not on a vial start this time. So that means good things for me in terms of my sequencing. If I'm willing to use my fast mana, I can just play a Thought-Knot Seer out now and potentially take my opponent's scariest card, and then I still have Kozilek's Return next turn as a pretty powerful play. The awkward thing about doing that is if I see a hand that contains multiple lords, because then both of the lords would become 3/3s and invalidate my Kozilek's Return lines and my Bone Crusher Giant lines. So accordingly, I think I'm not going to get greedy here. And I'm just going to main phase Stomp this creature. So comical flop. I believe that in this deck list, Keuga is kind of the backup plan. So Keuga is there for those games that go long, my threats have been answered, that sort of thing. Like, that's what it's there for. Alright, so whenever you cast a Merfolk spell, you can tap or untap target permanent. And unfortunately, with all our 2 damage removal that we have in this deck, this is going to mean very bad things for me. Oh god. So now my opponent gets to tap my Thought Knots here, so I don't get to block this turn. I'm going to take 8. I get to play another Thought Knots here, and then I kind of need to hope that my opponent doesn't draw another Merfolk to tap down one of my idiots again. I need to take whatever this card is. I just can't afford that card to be a Merfolk. I would very happily trade double Thought Knots here for double Lord here, especially getting the Mirror Regery off the table is important. Oh, fuck. How big is this? 5/4? Is this better or worse than putting Clothis in play this turn? Better? I think better. There it is. There it is. That's very interesting. Now with what I have, there's a chance that I might be able to construct worlds where I sweep the board. Unfortunately, this is only 3 damage, so I will need to take out a Lord in combat in order to do that. Alright. If opponent does not have Force of Will, or sorry, if my opponent does not have Spell Pierce, I can sweep the board this turn with double Kozilek's Return. It would be an incredibly awkward sweep. The other thing I can go for is just killing my opponent. I have 6 direct damage to the face. This spot is super interesting. So my opponent doesn't die if I attack. They go to 1, but how would they block? Yeah, it's Spell Pierce that I have to worry about. If I sweep the board, well, it's double Kozilek's Return that would get Spell Pierced. The second Kozilek's Return would eat it. Because if I attack and my opponent does some blocking, things get a little weird. It also gets weird if some Thought Knots die in combat, and then all of a sudden, like, Force of Will in the second main phase becomes relevant again. Alright. We are going to YOLO this, but I'm going to play my land first, just in case things get a little weird. We cannot Fiery before damage. Fiery Confluence is a sorcery. All right. I don't think we lose. I'm gonna tap slightly differently, just in case. Man, fuck these stupid tilter lands. Wow. Did not expect to win that game, given how quickly my opponent invalidated my early Kozilek's returns and Bone Crusher Giants. I really dislike Merfolk as an archetype, but my opponent's build is pretty cool. Like, I will fully admit this. Like, this is one of the more interesting Merfolk builds I've seen in the last, I don't know, 3 or 4 years. Comical Plop, did they know the top of their library from Sylvan Library? It's very possible that they did. I wasn't keeping track of that. Yeah, and if they don't have a blue card in hand, drawing Force isn't an out, and their 1 mana permission isn't an out because I have Spell Pierce. Or, sorry, because I have 2 lands available. Yeah, I did kind of kill my opponent in 1 turn from basically full health. That was okay. It's a really weird spot for my opponent. Alright, Casey was playing some sort of lands, Dark Depths sort of thing last time I played against him. So this turn 1 Blood Sun is probably pretty hot. Breaking news, the sun is hot. You've got me there. You've got me there. Note that Blood Sun is very interesting against Dark Depths strategies. And note that I don't use the word good here. So, what happens with Blood Sun and Dark Depths is that if you play the Dark Depths after the Blood Sun is in play, the Dark Depths enters the battlefield with no counters on it. So that if the Blood Sun is destroyed, it instantly causes the creation of a Merit Lodge token. So, while this Blood Sun is potentially very damaging to my opponent, there are worlds where my opponent goes Dark Depths, Abrupt Decay, and I die. It's awkward that this isn't a green Spirit Guide, so I can Ceratops. I could play Spirit Guide as an attacker, but I think Trinisphere is more valuable to have in play this game. All lands lose abilities except mana abilities is the exact wording of Blood Sun. So, like, the things that are mana abilities stay. Things like Thespian Stage's ability to copy things. Those, all right, my opponent's just done with me there. But things that are like adding extra abilities and such aren't really going to do things. All right, so what do we have versus this deck? Basically nothing. Whew. So boarding is going to be weird here because I don't think I'm going to do much of it. Corrosive Grip theoretically has some targets, but I don't think enough targets that I want to play it. I potentially want some extra removal for the early creatures that they can play out. I don't know if I'm supposed to go Kozilek's Return Deep, but I think I'm fine with these. I think I'm going to trim my top end and just like try to have more scenarios where I just curve out well. And then the next question is, do I actually want some Kozilek's Returns over anything else that's in my deck? The Transfers are a little questionable on the play, but they're one of my few disruptive pieces. I don't know how much I love Transfer on the draw. But I might need to keep it. I feel like I'm very good against the hands where my opponent tries to play a mid-range game, and basically Stone Cold Dead to the versions where they just mulligan to something that can make a turn to Merit Lodge. Like, I have 2 cards that answer the Merit Lodge once it's in play, and maybe I should aggressively mulligan into that. So, like, this is good against early Bobs, Elvish Reclaimers, Vampire Hex Mages that are just played out, but otherwise pretty dead. I think I'm still going to keep the Trinispheres despite the fact that I don't really think they're insane. This is turn 2 Blood Sun, or turn 2 Trinisphere, with a threat to back it up and a removal spell for an early creature. This is fine, but not exciting. Okay. Dying to a turn 2 Merit Lodge is pretty unlikely now. Still possible due to Lotus Petals, but pretty unlikely. So this is the turn where we make the defining decision of the game. Am I going to play Blood Sun or Trinisphere first? If I play Blood Sun and my opponent has Abrupt Decay in hand, I lose the game. And I would much rather have them play the Dark Depths out first. Now that I don't have the second Blood Sun as redundancy for the first, it's much scarier to just play out the Blood Sun. Accordingly, I believe it is correct to just play Trinisphere this turn. That way they have to have another land. No, Marius, I don't think that's true, right? If I play Trinisphere, and my opponent doesn't have another mana-producing land, it actually buys time. So, like, my opponent just tutored for Dark Depths. And I can't get Dark Depths and Blood Sunned in the same turn. Or sorry, they can't Abrupt Decay. Well, I guess with a Spirit Guide they could. So, like, regardless, I do this. I'm going to go with the 3-ball. Now that the combo is threatened, I will do this. Next turn I have Thought Knot Seer and Bone Crusher Giant away Elvish Reclaimer, assuming that 2 lands don't go to the graveyard. But if my opponent has Abrupt Decay, I have 2 outs to the Merit Lodge that they can produce. None of these cards are particularly relevant. I'm going to take the thing that's a body here. Yeah, I can't play the Stomp in this turn cycle. So I'm going to have to play it in the next turn cycle, which is admittedly a little bit awkward for me. But there's only 1 land in the graveyard right now. One, two, three, four. All right, what am I doing this turn? So, like, I play a land. I guess taking this off the board matters quite a bit. The question is like how I do so. I can go 4 mana Chandra plus to get my red to Bone Crusher Giant Stomp. I can also just like play this land. So it's 2, 4, 5, 6, 7. I can also just like stomp naturally and do something different with Chandra. Oh, sorry. There's 2 lands in the graveyard. So if they activate Elvish Reclaimer, Bone Crusher Giant would not kill it. So let's go about this way. Asajiri's Step would be a little annoying here, but like if that gets that out of the way, I'm okay with that situation. What? Oh, right, the Blood Sun. Is drawing 5 cards good? Oh yeah, Orem, I am very, very, very aware how dead I am to Abrupt Decay. we are off to a 2-0 start with our ape-fueled deck list. Or I guess like they're not all apes, right? Our spirit-fueled deck list is more accurate. Yeah, GG's. I was so dead to an Abrupt Decay all game. Deck list is super fun. Oh, cool. We were playing against Arkin. There's a pretty wide range of decks, so it will be very difficult to know what he is playing. Ooh, I am the final boss for Arkin's League. Let's see if we can deny him a 5-0. Am I on the play? I am on the play with a turn 1 Blood Sun. Yup. Opponent's on a Yorion deck, so shutting off all their fetch lands is pretty hot. Don't force me, Arkin. It's real bad if you force me. Nice, so now I can go turn 2 Planeswalker or Thought-Knot Seer. I am playing the Gungan Frog. I drew 5 last game. I think the Planeswalker hitting play as quickly as possible is the scariest thing for my opponent. Interestingly, Arkan's future Abundant Growth will be pretty good, because he can play a fetch land and then put in Abundant Growth on it to give it a mana ability and turn it into a mana-producing land. Yeah, so it applies in a lower layer, meaning that it happens before Blood Sun shuts it off. Ooh, tricky spot. Trinisphere is probably pretty good as a supplemental play. But getting another clock in play is also very tempting. I think I'm just going to Trinisphere. I need the Chandra unchecked for 2 turns in order to just like ultimate, and then I just literally do not think I can lose the game if this ultimates. So my opponent wants to play something like a Ice Fang Coatl this turn. So I think as long as I hold up Bone Crusher Giant's Stomp, I don't lose this game. Yeah, there's a great example of like not getting greedy and remembering what's important. Just gonna absolutely cash this in here. And then all I need to do is cast 3 spells and my opponent dies. Seeing as I have more than 3 spells currently, I should probably play any spell that is disruptive first. So that makes me most inclined to cast the Thought-Knots here this turn. Stomp face, send a message. I would not expect to... I would not be surprised if my opponent concedes here. Rather than show me their hand. Ooh. Okay. So we are going to get rid of the card that has life gain. Or I should say we should get rid of the card that has the most life gain potential over the course of the game, more accurately. So luckily for us, Snapcaster Mage into Swords to Plowshares is not really a thing that is going to happen under Trinisphere. We definitely don't show that this game. My opponent's dead either way. So, like, for sure, I like the 2 extra Planeswalkers. And then this might sound a little bit odd, but I think Kozilek's Return is also totally reasonable as a card that I cast. Because things like Bonecrusher Giant and Shifting Ceratops don't necessarily line up super well against these flash creatures that have Death Touch. So just like having something that helps to clear the Death Touchers out of the way is totally fine. Fiery Confluence is a finisher, or it does 1 damage to their board and 4 damage to them. I think Fiery Confluence is quite good. I'm not really sure what I'm supposed to board out, because I think... Sure, actually, I guess Shifting Ceratops has protection from blue, so Ice Fang and whatever aren't super good against it. Yeah, maybe Kozilek's Return is too much, as long as I'm keeping the Bonecrusher Giants in. Like, I need some removal to defend my Planeswalkers from chip damage. Trimming dead is reasonable. The other thing I can do is trim Trinisphere when I'm on the draw. But I'm not 100% about that. Keep or maul? Keep or maul? What I put back is actually really difficult, in my opinion. If I put back Bonecrusher Giant, I don't have something to put in play to work towards Keuga drawing cards, and I don't have early removal. So I think I'm supposed to put back Confluence. But Confluence is kind of the nuts as the game goes long. So there's a world where I don't play anything this turn, and I just play turn 2 Shifting Ceratops and say, you need to have Swords to Plowshares or you lose this game. I'm not going to play towards that world, but I just want to acknowledge that that world is a thing that exists. So whatever spell I play in this turn cycle will resolve. We're looking at a similar start to last game, but unfortunately, since I have Ancient Tomb instead of City of Traders, I'm going to do a good amount of damage to myself over the course of the course of this game. So this is a turn where I decide if I want to try to win the game off of one Bone Crusher Giant, and I think the answer is no, that's not reasonable, and I need to save my mana to cast a Planeswalker spell that will do more. The issue is that, like, my opponent is going to play Magic, and I'm not right now. But I don't think Bone Crusher Giant is going to be able to deal 19 points of damage. I think trying to resolve a Chandra of some nature or a Shifting Ceratops will just, like, be better luck. Yeah, so, like, I would have lost if I just played Bone Crusher Giant there. Well, that's a great card, theoretically, in this matchup. Not in this exact circumstance. If my opponent didn't have Back to Basics, that would be pretty crippling here. Am I done here? Feels sort of like I'm done here. Like, Uro is looming, Oko is here. I'm stuck on mana due to Back to Basics. I'm gonna go ahead and throw in the towel. So Arkin is probably playing something like 1 or 2 copies of Back to Basics. Do I care enough to board in Krosan Grip? I might. But again, like we saw with the previous game, I don't know how many cards I can cut. Like, most of my deck seems good. Bone Crusher Giant is maybe the weakest thing otherwise. And otherwise, Krosan Grip can hit a Baleful Strix, which is not a good exchange, or Abundant Growth and Astrolabe, which are also not good exchanges. So I'm not sure if I'm supposed to play around the card that beats me, because it's such a bad draw in every other circumstance. Clothis is insane. Absolutely insane here. Yeah, I think I'm just going to play towards being aggressive enough that my opponent's late game doesn't get to happen. And not board in the 2 of in my non-manipulation deck. For the 2 of in their deck. Is this hand good enough? I do nothing on turn 1 or 2. I get turn 3 Blood Sun into maybe turn 4 Shifting Ceratops. I don't know that this hand is good enough. Like, it has fine cards and a fine spell to mana ratio, but my opponent playing a fair game might end up outvaluing me. I think I'm going to ship this. This is a much better hand, I think. This will get me a turn 2 lock piece. Which will probably be the Trinisphere, but not 100% sure. Blood Sun stops their fetches. And that's definitely relevant. So interesting play. Trinisphere resolving means that all of my future spells are more likely to resolve. Blood Sun resolving means I don't get a second chance to fetch. I'm going to go ahead and play the Trinisphere here, though. So many of the cards in my opponent's deck either cantrip or effectively cantrip that I just really want to have this in play against my opponent. Yeah, so as expected, I have given them a second chance to fetch. But they don't get another chance beyond that. Blood Sun isn't about taking my opponent off of mana in this deck, necessarily. Blood Sun is about constraining my opponent's ability to generate enough mana to be able to do things like Yorion easily. Alright, that's super annoying. I probably just take the draw 2 here. I don't think I just want to like play Chandra into the Elk. This is currently uncounterable, draw 2. And then if my opponent just like makes... My opponent probably Elks this. And then once my opponent makes their own Elk, I can like minus on that. That's probably fine. I could like try to get a little more value out of this. But this is a spot where like my draw a card is guaranteed to resolve. And overall, I think I'm good with that. Oh man, Oko dies. Well, Oko maybe doesn't die. So if opponent has Force of Will, things get a little awkward for me. They have another Ice Fang, things are weird as well. And it's so bad if they have Ice Fang. It's so bad if they have Ice Fang. If I just like minus to try to kill the Oko. I'm still doing it. But I need to take this Oko off the board so that Clothis can take over the game. Clothis on a board where Oko's life gain can invalidate it is not necessarily the best. So like now my opponent pluses Elks this, attacks my Planeswalker, kills it. I don't get to kill Oko. And my Clothis is awkward. Yep, there's the exact play that I was talking about earlier. Oh, yikes. We're dead. So, at any point, the Jace can unsummon this Trinisphere, and life is super bad for me. I don't have, like, Pyroblast to go and just, like, kill these walkers as a top deck. I'm actually going to attack Jace here, because if my opponent doesn't Fate Seal me, and I were to draw Bone Crusher Giant, then I could at least take one of the walkers off the board. Okay, so Bone Crusher Giant for a Jace isn't out. To part of the problem. But my opponent just having an Oko in these sorts of matchups just means that they win. Oko is devastatingly good against these Red Prison style decks. Always has been, always will be. It's the sort of card that if it's the only spell you cast in a game, you might win anyway. Shifting Ceratops is actually pretty interesting. Because that is protection from blue and haste. The issue is that these food tokens are going to be green. Alright, we're still playing Magic. So we'll take haste there. We can kill Jace. So I will take the opportunity to do so. Swords to Plowshares is a huge kick in the teeth here if my opponent actually has that. Alright, nice. So now we're playing towards like Fiery Confluence draws being very good to allow us to get us through this. But maybe we've stalled the board enough. Oh, wow. What is Arkan playing in the second main phase that can stall out the Shifting Ceratops? And or this Trinisphere. A Dead of Winter is a possibility. He could have just drawn like Snapcaster Plow or something like that. I think I'm going to go ahead and take the block here. It's something that I like see myself doing long term anyway, is like trading for that food. Okay, it's just Yorian time for draw 5 cards. No big deal. It's fine, probably. So now Abundant Growths move to both of the fetch lands. Luckily, my opponent is going to be discarding almost all of the cards that they draw. So, like, while my opponent is drawing 5 cards here, it's more like they're drawing 1 card and then casting a very good selection spell. That's actually not too bad for me. Three, 4, 5, 6, 7. I can get 8 mana this turn and play double Thought-Knot Seer, as long as I'm willing to use either the Spirit Guide or Klothys for mana. I think I'm willing to use the Spirit Guide and just like continue to pick at my opponent's graveyard with Klothys. The life gain and life loss are both incredibly relevant right now. Can I count? I can't count. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Oh, right, I'm going to keep one floating. Okay, never mind. I can count. I don't really know why I'm doing this pre-combat. I should have attacked first. Alright. Not bad. It feels like I have to attack in order to try and win this game, but it also feels like I'm on the wrong side of the attacking equation here. Because my opponent can create these food jump blockers but I need to play towards a Fiery Confluence win. And Clothis plus Fiery Confluence is a kill next turn, depending on what my opponent draws. So just like that, my chances of winning have gone down the toilet. Uro being played and redeployed in the same turn means that I can't eat it with Clothis, which normally would be my out to that sort of situation. Yeah, I think that food attack is a touch greedy. Okay. What does this do? So I can deal 3 damage, kill Food, Astrolabe, Strix, take 10 on the backswing and die, or hold back Shifting Ceratops so I don't die. This is like so close to working. But not quite there. Like I cannot damage myself via Ancient Tomb. Stonewall Uro with Shifting Ceratops. But then my opponent animates the other Astrolabe and I take 7, which is exactly lethal still. Otherwise, I tap Ancient Tomb for mana and gain life and do damage, and that doesn't quite work either. We're just outside of the ability to pivot here. And just any single target removal isn't good enough. So like I can cast this, kill the food, do a total of 7 this turn, and then die to board. What do you mean, wait? Oh, wait a second. Devotion count? No, it's 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Wait. It works? Hold on. Wait. Okay, so what does it do if we turn that into a creature? So I go, turn it into a creature. I bash for 9. Still not lethal? How do I not die? I leave back blockers? So I don't have a kill. Yeah, I don't have a kill, but I cannot die. Alright. Because I don't want to tap my Ancient Tomb to hurt myself. Oh yeah, I guess that's true. Okay, so now this is an indestructible blocker, but my opponent will turn it into an elk on their turn. So I still have an Oko Chump covered. And then we'll see how Arkin plays this. Oh shoot, I do die to him making a token by making that attack. Yeah, I didn't play this last turn cycle optimally. Okay. GG's. Yeah, so I don't know how realistically I'm supposed to beat an Oko with this deck. Normally, the Red Prison style decks have a bunch of Pyroblasts in the sideboard specifically to deal with that problem. But because we're playing Keuga, we can't have that. So I would need CMC 3 or greater answers to Oko in red-green. And the issue is that a lot of the red things at that cost are going to be direct damage things that aren't going to do enough damage to get rid of Oko's high loyalty count specifically. Chaos Warp. Yikes. Technically, that is an answer. Alright. I've had to pee for like the past 15 minutes. I will be right back. I'm back. Morning, Grizzle Brandon. Welcome. Yeah, I think this style of deck list is really interesting. But Oko and Friends are going to be a very, very popular portion of the format, and this deck, as it is constructed currently, doesn't really have answers to Oko. And I don't think that's an acceptable place to be. So maybe the Karn version that at least has access to Sorcerer Spyglass out of the board is better. Well, Echo, if I start playing Pyroblast, I lose access to my companion, right? I'm not sure that this hand is actually good. If I play a turn 2 Trinisphere with this hand, I lose my City of Traders on the following turn before I've deployed anything that actually matters. Accordingly, I think I'm going to mulligan this hand and try to look for something I can either like drop an early Planeswalker or drop a disruptive piece into another card. Because as is, like, I would play this hand. Well, alternatively, I just go like basic land, or like maybe basic land Fiery Thicket into turn 2 Trinisphere off Spirit Guide instead. Maybe that's good enough, and I'm overthinking it. I don't think this hand is particularly good, is what I'm getting at. I think Forest Go probably telegraphs what's coming next the least. Ancient Tomb means that I don't have to use my Spirit Guide this turn. I am on board with that. I'm fine with the life loss here. Now opponent just plays turn 3 Oko and I lose. And we had a fun and interactive match. Ooh! Ooh! Also, can we take a moment to appreciate how fucking clutch this Firelit Thicket is? And honestly, so I have 5 mana for Keuga next turn, so I think I just want to make mana here. And just get another thing into play. If my opponent misses on a land drop, I have a Planeswalker and 2 creatures in play alongside Trinisphere. Ooh, buddy. I guess technically I should play this land first. There are worlds where, like, I hit something that I actually want to cast. Fire Confluence means GG next turn. Barring something like Snowland into Dead of Winter. Alright. I liked the part where my opponent didn't draw Oko, and so I didn't lose the game, but I won the game instead. So what did we do last time around? I think we cut the Dead Gons for the Chandras. And that felt pretty good. But yeah, I think any time my opponent plays a turn 3 Oko, like how do I win? Like, I think an Oko on average is probably worth about 6 of my cards. And I don't think I'm exaggerating that number, unfortunately. My opponent has mulliganed. I have a turn 1 Trinisphere hand. Keep. Opponent has mulliganed again. I still have a turn 1 Trinisphere hand. If these were green Spirit Guides, I might just Dino on 1. I'd probably still Trinisphere, but I'd think about it, because I could just, you know, turn 1 Trinisphere, turn 2 Ceratops, but there would be a hesitation. Opponent must be looking at a rough set of 5 cards over there. The mulligan decision was not easy for them. So there's 2 ways that the beginning of this game plays out now. Way 1 is that they're able to counter my Trinisphere, but it costs them 2 cards, and they're down just... Interesting. And they're down a significant amount. Way 2 is I just cast Trinisphere into Dino, and that's it for my opponent. Because they mulliganed so low, they didn't have the ability to keep a Force of Will-based hand. So this is super cool, right? So let's make green, and we do that with red. Firelit Thicket there was such an amazing draw. We still probably lose to Oko. Unclear. Like, opponent goes plus, makes a 3/3. I attack Oko, then if they draw another creature or artifact, they create a second one that Ceratops doesn't get through, and then I lose. That's a fine draw. Certainly don't mind having another body to add to the board. Do you have Swords to Plowshares? That's very good if you do. You do. That's okay. I think I'm just going to put a threat onto the board. Fortunately, this costs me a decent amount of life. This isn't like getting every possible bit of value out of the Bone Crusher Giant, but given how terrified I am of Oko, I want to have a body on the board, and I also just want more things in play, so that way when I cast this Keuga, and I will do it basically as early as possible, I get to draw, 2, 3, 4 cards, something like that. Why is Ceratops better than Questing Beast? Pro Blue. Uncounterable. Not legendary. It has a different set of keyword soup that requires a little bit more of a mana investment. Like, they're cards with very different strengths. Best friend Tabitha, well, I'm hoping to get a couple of donations and not have to think about that. I have a couple of people who have talked to me about a D&T stream and weirdo Yorian Enchantress Curses sort of stream. So I'm expecting to get some things, but we'll see. The queue just kind of dried up when everyone was really down on the current companion format. Okay, library is pretty darn good on this board. I'd like to draw a land here to play Keuga, but like a threat is totally acceptable as well. Opponent is burning their clock away with inaction. Yeah, that's fine, Reaple Jeep. Am I fine with just taking a draw 2? It essentially filters the Spirit Guide into another card and then draws me a new card while leaving me with a very large body on board. think I'm fine with it. It walks into like a Dead of Winter or Supreme Verdict kind of badly, but otherwise puts an insane amount of pressure on my opponent. Alright, so we go exile for green, turn into green, green. Then I can use colorless for this, and then cast this. $12 is fine for your brew, Reaple cheap. Oh, nice. That's very, very, very good. So if opponent gets aggressive with the Sylvan Library, I will Fiery Confluence their Dome. Yeah. Old Rocket, so generally my philosophy is, if I feel like I have a reasonable chance of winning games of Magic with the deck that you've submitted, I'm fine with my stock rate of $12. If you are playing something that is like purely for entertainment and like there is a very low chance that I can actually win matches with it, then a little bit more than that is appreciated. I do not think that is going to be enough life to keep our opponent alive. I have 9+6 on board. Okay. That's a very potent combination. Oh, we got the Oko. Uro is still a huge problem. But opponent also doesn't have enough cards in graveyard to bring it back right now. A fetch land would do it. Yeah, I'm sponsored by Card Hoarder, so they give me a fully stocked loan account. So if I attacked with the Thought-Knots here and my opponent didn't block for some reason, I get there this turn. But they would most assuredly block. So my opponent has probably turned the corner here in terms of stabilizing. So this has absolutely turned into a real game. We wanted to end the game prior to this point. That's unfortunate. Now our Fiery Confluence isn't live to close out the game. And then this is just going to be a repeat of last game as the game goes long. They've made their Uro harder for themselves to cast since they have 2 non-basics, but they can just like cast it and then like Uro being in play is enough to take over the game. Yeah, so they convert that to green, play Uro, and then I don't think I can win. Like, this puts them up to 11 life. With the ability to rebuy either one of these once. And the attack puts them to 14 and basically puts them out of range where Fiery Confluence beats them, because I have like 12 on the backswing. And I don't really have profitable double blocks because of the Caracas. Like, and I can't just like Thought Knot Seer plus Bone Crusher Giant it away. If I trade with the Uro, it comes back later. So it's 6, 10, 12. I'm 1 point of short of killing them if I draw a red source and they don't have a counterspell. The issue is if I trade with the Uro, it comes back, and I also don't know how I beat the Yorion. So I'm going to take no block. No, I can't take no blocks. I die. It's 10 damage. Alright. I don't want to beat the dead horse about this, but this is exactly the format I was afraid of playing in when I recorded Eternal Glory. Where when you try to do something fair and you run into these Yorion control decks with Oko, Uro, Yorion, like, you just get outvalued and can't do enough. I could play to take a few more seconds off of my opponent's clock, but I don't think that's worth it. Again, with the same reasoning as before, I'm not going to board in the Crimson Grips for back to basics. Who didn't see Yori and Snoko coming? Watsy? So this is turn 2 Bone Crusher Giant into turn 3 Bone Crusher Giant into turn 4 Chandra or Shifting Ceratops, depending on what land. I draw. Ideally, I'd like to open up on a lock piece, but maybe with multiple Planeswalkers and an uncounterable pro-blue threat, this is good enough. I'm going to keep it. PayPal shouldn't be taking a 20% cut. PayPal should be taking something like 50 cents out of that. I don't know what happened there. I'll take a look at it. if you're going from a different currency. I see. Reapal Treat, maybe in the future then, like, you and I should coordinate, and, like, if you're going to do future donation decks, like, maybe you should just do them in ticks or something like that, so we don't hit a fee like that in the future. So the other frustrating thing that I didn't talk about yet about this sort of matchup is that my opponent can just, like, mulligan very aggressively for an Oko, because as the game goes long, their Yorion will bail them out of any resources they expend in mulliganing very aggressively. I'm still going to take the Uro, I think, even though Brainstorm is the better card here. The Sylvan Library bails my opponent out, and if the game goes long, I do not really want them to have access to this Uro. The Force of Negation is certainly a nuisance with my double Planeswalkers here. But every mana spent casting a Brainstorm is a mana that is not going towards impacting the board. Honestly, Reapal Cheap, the real answer to this, like, the deck building problem is probably just, like, you don't play a deck like this in this metagame. So a very interesting question will be whether or not the Force of Negation is still there after casting that card. So we can't get Icefang Coattled right now. Yeah, good, definitely good. I still get damage out of Bone Crusher Giant there. Now, if the Force of Negation is still there, it trades for this Chandra. But if it's not there, I have a Chandra. Okay, so my opponent is now Hellbent. I have 3 cards in hand, a 4-power creature in play already, a Looming Companion. All in all, I'm okay with where things are at. Oh, wow. Yep. There it is. That's not going to be enough, though. So opponent only has 1 mana available, so I attack them for 4, and then Bone Crusher Giant their face and steal this game. I just confirm this hits any target. Yeah. All right. Got lucky. Yeah, that's why I can't Chandra, because the red would give them 1 life, and that would have been an absolute disaster. So I just want to point out that my opponent mulliganed to 5 in game 2 and won, and my opponent mulliganed to 5 in game 3 and was probably only a turn or 2 away from turning that game around to the point where I probably can't win. Doom. Yeah, mana base for this deck is a little weird because, like, you have lands that filter, you have lands that give your opponent life, and you have a land that hurts you. And so you have a little bit more to think about in terms of your mana usage than your average Legacy deck. I am going to keep this hand. This is a little weird, though. Turn 1, Blood Sun or Trinisphere. If I Trinisphere and my opponent is playing Delver, it is all sorts of bad news for me. Because, like, this Ancient Tomb will get wastelanded, and then because I don't have true mana sources in my hand, I'm going to die. So if my opponent is playing a Delver, it is actually probably better to Blood Sun them rather than Trinisphere, as weird as that sounds, because of, like, my great fear of Wasteland. However, if they are not playing Delver, I just want to jam this 3-ball. My opponent has played Delver and Snowco recently, with the Delver finish being on the 9th, that was still with Lurrus around. Alright, let's die to Wasteland. We'll be using green Spirit Guide here, given the composition of my hand. Alright, smells like I died a wasteland. Oh no, we're like so incredibly dead to wasteland. Ooh, snowland. Still could be blue-red Delver, but my odds of not being dead this turn are higher. Fuck. So because my opponent, maybe I should have just used the Spirit Guide to Blood Sun there. I was thinking that like since I don't have long-term mana prospects, it's maybe better for me to hold the Spirit Guide, but maybe that was just wrong and I should have just played City. Like if I use the Spirit Guide that turn, all right, so I can safely City here because of the Trinisphere if this Blood Sun is going to resolve. The Blood Sun doesn't do a lot other than like stabilize my own mana and make it so that I'm not going to need to take a whole bunch of damage off my Ancient Tomb. Okay, so opponent is just passing with mana up. While they don't have a threat, I don't want to cast something that is of Keuga quality. I just want to play magic cards. So we are going to do the somewhat anemic thing of just like play out some Spirit Guides as beaters. And then the turn where they tap out to play a threat, that's probably the turn where I go and play my Keuga. Ooh. That is very annoying. How do I want to play this turn cycle? Probably 3-ball first. And assuming the 3-ball resolves, I just use the Spirit Guide to Thought-Knot Seer. If the 3-ball doesn't resolve, it gets a little more interesting. Sure. And I believe that the Thought-Knot Seer is going to be worth 2 damage. That's really interesting. This is really hard, because my opponent has this Brazen Borrower hanging out in exile. And I have this answer to the Brazen Borrower, which kind of incentivizes me to take the Force of Will, but leaving them with the Lightning Bolt kind of leaves them with an aggressive clock. Like, I can try to dance around the Force of Will, but there's also these worlds where I need to like cast my Keuga to draw a bunch of cards and pressure them harder. And like my opponent gets to decide this turn whether they're going to be offensive or defensively minded, and I think they're going to be offensively minded. They're not sure though, which is good for me. So they're going to play Brazen Borrower come the end of their turn. And then I'm going to answer Brazen Borrower. So ignoring my Ancient Tomb, because I don't think I want to tap that. I just hold up 3 mana for my dead on Brazen Borrower. And this may force my opponent to hold back the True Name defensively. That's fine. There are awkward worlds where they just like Lightning Bolt me instead here. I think the Brazen Borrower line is pretty high upside. Nope. Just going for the Bolt. Sure. If I have the removal spell that I'm representing, that forces me to hold up mana next turn as well. This line also allows them to play towards a second Bolt, killing me without exposing their stuff to a removal spell. Are they dead? So I have 5, 9, 10, 11. They are not dead. But they will, like, 100% be dead next turn. I still need to play around Brazen Borrower. So Brazen Borrower can only block creatures with flying, so, like, I'm still getting the 6 in here. And I still need to hold up the Dead Gone for Brazen Borrower so I don't die. So we are dead to Lightning Bolt. And to clarify, it is another Lightning Bolt than the one Lightning Bolt that we have already seen. So there are 2 Lightning Bolts remaining in the deck. And Counter Magic doesn't help my opponent here. Alright, that's representing that they drew the lightning bolt, which is super frustrating. Actually, I should not, like, remind them that I can do that. So we're playing against a blue-red Delver deck. I probably just want more removal spells, and that's basically it. Trinisphere on the play is potentially okay. Trinisphere on the draw, I think, is very bad. It may just be, anyway, that I'm not supposed to play this game like I am a prison deck. I am supposed to just play this game like I am the deck that is bigger than you. If this game goes long, I live. And just play things that help me elongate the game. True Name Nemesis is going to be a problem card. Yeah, I think I am going to cut 3 balls both on the play and on the draw. And play a more, like, board control slash creature-oriented plan. Chandra Awakened Inferno is probably going to be my next cut, since it is slow, bad, well, not bad against Daze, but like bad against Wasteland. And I'm going to keep all of my Blood Suns, because keeping my City of Traders around as these games go really long is going to be important. What a weird hand. I could turn 1 YOLO Thought-Knot here, or I can turn to a Planeswalker around a Daze. Either way, losing this land early is rough. I don't think this is going to be a mulligan, but the hand is certainly odd. We're not gonna YOLO turn 1. Yeah, that's kind of what I didn't want to see. So now, how do I play this game? I can just, like, wait a little while and do some things somewhat safely. So I could Thought-Knot Seer around Daze this turn using Elvish Spirit Guide, and then go land Chandra next turn, lose my city, but also play that around a Daze sort of effect, which is probably okay. But Force of Will into, like, Wasteland here basically kills us. If we get wastelanded, this game is over. Like, if my opponent wastelands Taiga, I will never claw back out of that. Yeah, alright, we got Delvered. Like, we accept that. Oh, great, they wastelanded the wrong land there, which I'm very, 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 very thankful for. Now it's just bad. The game's not over. I don't know that I'm going to play my Chandra next turn. Thinking specifically about Keuga mana. My opponent plays another threat here. I might have to just to take pressure off of myself. I would love to draw Kozilek's Return here. Oh, fuck. We're going to play Kozilek's Return around days. Fuck yeah! Given that draw, I will play Chandra around Days. I don't think I'm going to play Chandra around Spell Pierce. I don't want to like set myself up to keep losing lands. We will lose this Planeswalker to a Bolt. But if we drag this game on and I get to draw, 2 or 3 cards with Keuga, that's pretty powerful. Ooh, did not have Bolt. Could still have Chain Lightning. That's still quite good against me. Ooh. Ooh. They don't actually have a cantrip in the graveyard yet. So I'm not going to, 100%. That stings. That stings a little bit. We have 5 mana towards that. Ugh. So now we have a 5/4 creature. If our opponent draws Bolt, they can Bolt it, attack, Bolt it again. Otherwise, we probably win this one. I do not believe that we beat the Delver Days Force Wasteland opener that had 2 Delvers afterwards. That Kozilek's Return off the top was clutch. So now I am on the draw. This is the only card that I can, really consider adjusting in my plan. But I think I'm okay with that being a one of. My 4 mana Haymakers are good enough. And, this thing is definitely worse in the face of True Name Nemesis, specifically. Huh. Huh. Sure, this card is really good. And I have a removal spell. But this Ancient Tomb as my land opener situation is, like, really weird. And my colored mana situation is also sort of weird. I think I keep this hand, and I kind of hope that my opponent goes turn 1 Delver that I can just kill with Dead. Nope. No. I'm going to take this one a little slowly. Maybe try to play around some soft permission. We have Clothis to help out with a Dreadhorde Arcanist that comes down on turn 2. That's the threat we don't want our opponent to have. Like, I want my opponent to have something like a Delver or a Sprite Dragon that I can just kill. Alright, great. Opponent may have a decent amount of counter magic, but they don't have early pressure. They might have just kept a hand based on the strength of something like True Name Nemesis. I think it's time to play this card. I get to play it around days, and if I trade for Force, I'm good with that. And if it resolves, oh buddy. I wonder if they're stuck in a situation where they have, like, Force and True Name Nemesis. Ooh, it's in play. Brazen Borrower can bounce this at some point in this game, so, like, it's not like it's 100% sticking around forever, but it's probably pretty good. Yeah, I might even just, like, Gone and bounce this creature and just, like, eat up some of my opponent's mana. Given that if I bounce this thing and then I eat the Ponder, and, like, my opponent doesn't play another cantrip in the turn cycle, Clothis has bought me a lot of time. I don't really think that my opponent has a Delver at this point. So it's definitely kind of a weird play. I think it's okay. I don't think it's great because, like, I don't have gas in hand. And I'm going to play it using these lands and not playing around a Daze, because like our opponent used a Daze last turn, and didn't Daze Clothis again. Oh, holy crap. If I get a Force of Will out of this, like, I'm so good with that. I think that makes my Keuga more likely to resolve later on in this game. I probably put my opponent into a really weird spot, yeah. So that's Force pitching a Ponder. So my opponent will get to Ponder off of the Arcanist this turn. Yeah, I don't know what my opponent's situation is like. Like, I don't know the other cards that are in their hand. And that is going to, like, drastically change how this game is supposed to be played. But barring something like a True Name Nemesis coming down, I actually kind of like my spot here. Yeah, that's very bad for me. Oh, wow, opponent did not have another Force effect. That was just purely a tempo bounce for 2 life. So now they'll just eat that immediately so that my Clothis doesn't get it. But now that that Bolt is gone, like, my Keuga is definitely scary for them. And they don't have the mana to hardcast the Brazen Borrower right now. Interesting. Alright, so what am I doing in this turn cycle? So I have 6 mana. I could Thought-Knot Seer and Bone Crusher Giant. I could play Keuga. Actually, hold on. 2, 4, 5, 6. I can make a 7th mana. So I could just play Thought-Knot Seer and Bone Crusher Giant if I make mana instead of taking the health and drain. Gumming up the board so this can't attack is probably pretty good. The only thing about playing the Giant is that it's my removal spell for Brazen Borrower in the future. I think I just take the drain and just play Thought-Knot Seer this turn, not tapping Ancient Tomb. And then I play Keuga next turn if my opponent doesn't just pass with 3rd land up. So I don't really care about the Daze and Pierce stuff right now. I can just play around those. Let's just like take this Flying Body out of there. leave them with a Daze and Pierce that I know about. I'm totally good with that. That's a very good top deck for them. Because like that gives them another card that I don't know about. This is great, right? Okay. So I need 7 mana in order to resolve this. I have 2, 4, 5, 6. With a land, I can turn that into the 7th card. Or I can just like use my City of Traders and continue to drain. Interesting spot. I'll think about this for a second. The continued drain plus Planeswalker in play is very valuable. This City of Traders is not really doing me a ton. I think I just used the city this turn. Because then I have 2, 4, 6, 7, 8, which plays around that or even around another Daze. So we're just saving this Keuga essentially for as long as possible to draw as many cards as I can off of it. Alright, and opponent just lets it go, knowing that they can't win the fight. Opponent has had some very good draws. Admittedly, they don't have a land here. Is this a Keuga turn? It's only a Keuga draw 1. Although, honestly, that might be enough. We're just taking that bolt out of the graveyard. Or no, I can't Keuga, right? I don't have green. So the real question is, do I just cast a Bone Crusher Giant as a clock? And something that powers up the Keuga? I can also just play the Spirit Guide as a threat and keep this around, which honestly sounds good to me. Like, this Bone Crusher Giant can turn into 2 damage to the face at any point. My Clothis theoretically wins this game unless my opponent sticks a problematic creature that really shuts me down. True Name Nemesis probably being the best one. Like, there's worlds where, like, a True Name into another True Name or something like that ends up beating me, or, like, a True Name plus an Arcanist is enough to overcome what I have going on. It sure is a Clothis. So I know my opponent has a Daze and a Pierce. I'm just going to go ahead and kill the Delver here because it plays around Daze and opens up my mana on my turn to actually cast the Bone Crusher Giant itself. And if they like fought over this with a Force of Will or something like that, that seems like an incredibly good trade for me. Red prison player are always cheat, top deck, no playing skill. And almost every word in that message was spelled wrong, by the way. It was good. Like, can I still pull it up? PRIZNPLYANG. Strong. Salt, 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 salt. All right. Overall, we ended up with 4-1 with a loss to Arkin in what was an incredibly grindy matchup. I'm still very worried about our ability to beat Oko ever, and the repeated life gain from something like Uro is also a problem. So I don't know that this is the most viable deck in the current metagame necessarily, but this is the sort of deck list that I would like to have in my pocket. Because assuming that, like, some piece of Snoko ends up going at some point, Keuga's card draw is really powerful. Like, really, really powerful. Yes, there's going to be plenty of games where it only draws you one card when it enters the battlefield, but a cantripping 5/4 is pretty good. And for those games where you have like Blood Sun, Trinosphere, Klothys out, and when you cast one of those and you get like 3 cards and you already have some lock pieces in play, that's very powerful. Yeah, I don't know about something like Choke. I don't know that Choke is strong enough against the current iterations of the Astrolabe piles that are also playing Abundant Growth. So, like, I definitely use Choke to fight against previous iterations of the Oko decks, but, like, Blood Sun already does some work against the, like, cantrip plus fetch land portion of the deck, and I don't know that the Choke is going to do enough that it's worth a card. Like, if we look at the sideboard, I think we need these. I think we need Krosan Grip because otherwise, or something like it. Otherwise, we're just going to be Stone Cold. Well, not Stone Cold dead, but we're going to have a lot of trouble with something like an Ensnaring Bridge in like pseudo prison mirrors. I want to have some extra Planeswalkers or something like that for the games that go long. I need Graveyard Hate. I need a little something extra for the combo decks because we're not playing Chalice. So, like, I don't know how much room there is in the sideboard to adjust things. And I'm also not sure that Sulfuric Vortex is actually better than something like Klothys. I think Klothys was quite good, as we saw in that last match there. Like, Klothys going and just helping to keep things like Arcanist and Uro in check, while also, like, being a continuous source of damage and life gain is pretty good. So, I would rather play another Klothys than a Sulfuric Vortex, but I don't think I want a third Klothys since they're legendary, right? And they're both legendary and hard to answer. So, I don't know. We did do something I never expected to do. Like, in every other deck that I've played with one of these things that turns on with 7 Devotion, I have never been able to turn on the Devotion. But because we have so many cards with multiple, like, green-green or red-red symbols, we actually did turn on Klothys once, and it was relevant. And that was not something that was in, like, my mental calculations at all. Like, I had not considered that this deck could actually turn on Klothys. But between, like, the Planeswalkers, Ceratops, Keuga, it is actually possible as these games go very long that Klothys can be turned into a creature, which is both an upside and a downside. The downside being that it becomes easier to remove with Source of Plowshares. Tuxdev, I love Big Chandra, but you might be right. So, for example, it might be better to like, play these in the main deck and these in the sideboard, just because it's so much easier for us to get to 4 mana, and Chandra Torch of Defiance was very strong throughout this league. Hazoret. That's interesting. As far as legendary creatures go, I worry about the amount of Karakas that's running around in the format right now. It's less than when Luris was taking over everything, but there's still a decent amount of it. So I'm not going to say that you're wrong with that suggestion, because I think that is a very good suggestion. I'm just curious about it. But I think the Chandra switch is correct. And it's actually possible that instead of Chandra Awakened Inferno in the sideboard, that there's some like red or green Planeswalker that we would rather have instead, that is just at the 4 CMC range. So like, bad example, but there's the idiot who like makes like hasty satyrs or something like that. What is it, Xenagos? So like something like Xenagos like maybe wouldn't be crazy as just like a repeated creature source. Yeah, I don't know. Like I'd have to like actually pull up Planeswalkers and look at abilities. The thing I worry about a lot of those Planeswalkers though is that like they're not going to be good against Oko. Like if I'm making 2/2s and my opponent is making 3/3s, that doesn't end up going well for me in the long term. Yeah, I don't know. Like there's definitely something here with Keuga, though. Yeah, Garruk Wildspeaker minuses to make 3/3s though, right? And like, I don't know that I want to be minusing to make 3/3s when my opponent can be plussing to make 3/3s. Phil, just splash blue for Oko. Rug Keuga. Let's go bad mana base. What can go wrong with playing a 3-color deck that also has Ancient Tombs and City of Traders? Flip Garruk is totally reasonable. Like those are Death Touchers. Single green is a touch easier. Firelit Thicket was very good, very good in this league. The ability to convert like a mountain into green for shifting Ceratops was hot, and like a couple of times like we had these spirit guides, and like we could Simian Spirit Guide into green, and that was super cool. I don't think you can max out on these because like they're bad in multiples because like they don't produce the starting mana for each other. But there's a lot of really neat things going on in this deck. Just jam 4 Crystal and Giant in here and always get hexproof the first time. Yeah, seems good. Someday we're going to end up playing like a Crystal and Giant, like Lightning Greaves Metalworker deck on stream. It'll be glorious. All right, folks, I think that's all I have for you for today. I will be back on Monday night. Bookish Matt, I highly recommend that you check out the VOD, or it'll be live on YouTube in a couple of hours. We ended up with a very good 4-1 stream featuring this deck list, only losing to my good friend Arkin. And speaking of Arkin, I'm going to go ahead and host him now and send you all that way. Please consider doing a donation deck list or subscribing or doing something to support the stream if you are really enjoying my legacy content. Next week will be my last week of work, and then I will be off for the summer, so I'll be looking to do a decent amount more content creation. So have a great rest of the day, and I'm going to turn you over to Arkin. And Turbojet Megachrist, thank you very much for supporting my shenanigans with your dealer's choice deck list selection.